In the heart of Durango, a small town surrounded by rugged mountains and sprawling fields, the air was thick with tension. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over dusty streets where whispers of recent violence lingered like a storm cloud. The townsfolk moved about cautiously, their faces lined with worry as they recalled the events that had shaken their peaceful community. Church bells rang out, echoing through the valley, calling everyone to Massachusetts. Yet today, the usual warmth of fellowship felt distant. Families filled the pews, but their hearts were heavy with grief and anger over the loss of loved ones to the ruthless Rustler who had terrorized their land. He was a man known for his quick temper and faster gun, leaving behind a trail of sorrow wherever he went. As the townspeople gathered in prayer, an unspoken fear hung in the air. What would happen if he showed up here? Would his kin seek revenge on those who dared to stand against him? The tension was palpable as eyes darted toward the church doors, half expecting violence to spill inside at any moment. Amidst this atmosphere of dread, hope flickered like a candle in the wind. The mission friar, a figure known for his kindness and unwavering faith, prepared to bring a message of peace to a people on the brink of chaos. Little did they know that today would test their beliefs in ways they never imagined. The Rustler, known as Jake "Quickshot" Mendez, had become a living nightmare for the people of Durango. His reputation spread like wildfire, fueled by tales of daring thefts and violent confrontations. With a notorious band of outlaws at his side, he rode through the sprawling fields, leaving ranchers trembling in fear. Many had lost livestock, crops, or even their loved ones to his reckless antics, and the scars ran deep. Rumors about Quickshot's latest escapades echoed in hushed tones as families sat in their pews, bracing themselves against the pain of loss. Just last month, a beloved local rancher had been gunned down while trying to protect his herd. Each tale was a reminder of the Rustler's impact, a dark shadow cast over what was once a peaceful existence. The townsfolk exchanged glances filled with unspoken anger, memories of the lives forever changed by Jake's brutal actions flooding their minds. Every corner of Durango bore witness to his cruelty, homes were left empty, children grew up without fathers, and resentment festered among neighbors who had once stood together. As the church bells tolled, the weight of grief settled heavily upon the congregation. They understood that today was not just about seeking solace in faith, it was about confronting the very embodiment of their fears. The possibility of Jake showing up hung like a specter over them, igniting their grief into a fierce desire for justice that could erupt at any moment. As the townsfolk wrestled with their sorrow and simmering anger, the mission friar, Father Luis, stood quietly at the back of the church. He was a man of deep faith, wearing a simple brown robe that had seen better days but gave him an air of humility and grace. Known for his compassion and calming presence, Father Luis had been a beacon of hope in Durango, guiding people through their darkest times. With his gentle smile and wise words, he often reminded the community of the power of forgiveness. Today, however, he knew that their hearts were heavy with desires for revenge against the Rustler who had wreaked havoc on their lives. In his heart, he felt the weight of what was to come. He sensed that the presence of Jake "Quickshot" Mendez might push this turmoil over the edge. As the bells pealed, drawing the congregation closer to prayer, Father Luis prepared to lead them in a message that would challenge their instincts. He believed that faith could heal even the most profound wounds. Standing at the altar, he recalled snippets of scripture about mercy and understanding, feeling a renewed sense of purpose in sharing these lessons. Unbeknownst to him, today's service would be unlike any other. He put aside his worries and focused on delivering a message that could guide his flock beyond vengeance toward healing, a moment that could define not only their faith but also the future of their community. The atmosphere grew thick with anticipation as he steeled himself for what lay ahead. Just as the church bells ceased ringing, a tense hush fell over the congregation, interrupted suddenly by a commotion outside. Dust kicked up on the road as a figure stumbled into view, clutching his side and gasping for breath. It was Jake "Quickshot" Mendez, blood-soaked and barely conscious, collapsing at the church door. The sight sent shockwaves through the crowd, eyes widening in disbelief and horror. Father Luis's heart raced as he quickly assessed the situation. Though he knew the rustler was responsible for so much pain in Durango, his instinct to help prevailed. He rushed toward Jake, who lay writhing on the ground, struggling to stay conscious. The friar knelt beside him, pressing his hands firmly against the wound to staunch the bleeding, his mind racing with prayers for both healing and guidance. The townsfolk were torn between their anger towards Jake and their instinctual need for compassion. Murmurs of outrage rippled through them as they witnessed Father Luis tending to their enemy. "Let him bleed," someone shouted from the back of the church, while others urged caution, fearing a trap. Ignoring the tension surrounding him, Father Luis focused solely on saving a life. In that moment, he believed that if he could save Jake, perhaps it could lead to a greater understanding among the people, a bridge toward healing rather than further division. As he worked to stabilize him, a storm of emotions swirled around them all: fear, anger, hope, setting the stage for an unpredictable reckoning within those hallowed walls. As Father Luis knelt beside Jake, the atmosphere inside the church grew electric with tension. The townsfolk watched, their emotions swirling like a tempest. Anger bubbled to the surface among some, while others felt a deep conflict over their own competing desires for justice and compassion. "Why are you helping him?" one voice called out sharply, slicing through the suffocating silence. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the pews, fists clenched in frustration at the sight of Jake being cared for by the very man they respected. The rustler who had robbed them of so much was now relying on their kindness, and it felt like a betrayal to many. "He deserves whatever he gets," another person shouted, their face flushed with rage as they stood up in protest. Ignoring the turmoil around him, Father Luis continued his work. He spoke softly to Jake, urging him to hold on as he worked to stop the bleeding. But despite his calm demeanor, he could feel the heat of hostility pressing down upon him from all sides. He glanced at the increasingly agitated crowd and knew time was running out. "Please," he implored, raising his voice just above a whisper yet still filled with gravity. "We cannot let our anger dictate our actions." It was evident that today would not only challenge the friar's faith but put every individual's humanity to a critical test as they faced their own darkness in a darkened church that held both fear and a glimmer of hope. The tension in the church reached a boiling point as the townsfolk's anger and fear clashed violently with Father Luis's calm pleas for compassion. A man in the back, unable to contain his emotions any longer, stepped forward, his face twisted in fury. "This is madness. He's the reason we're suffering," he shouted, his voice echoing against the stone walls. Around him, others stirred, some nodding in agreement while others shifted uneasily in their seats. It was clear that a divide was forming, threatening to disrupt the very purpose of their gathering. With every heartbeat, the air thickened with potential violence, fists clenched and eyes narrowed as people prepared for a confrontation. "Stay away from him," another voice rang out, rising from the front pews, where families who had lost loved ones to Quickshot's recklessness sat. The mood turned almost electric, like a storm about to break. Father Luis felt the weight of their collective grief and rage pressing down on him, yet he remained steadfast in his mission to restore peace. "Please," he implored again, raising his voice above the growing chaos. "Violence will not heal our wounds, love and understanding will." But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears as a few men began to move toward Jake, fueled by their need for retribution. Just as it appeared that all would erupt into chaos, a small child's cry pierced through the tension, reminding everyone present of innocence and what was truly at stake. One decision could change everything for their community. In that charged moment, the themes of forgiveness and violence clashed starkly within the walls of the church. The townsfolk were caught in a whirlwind of emotions, driven by their grief and anger while wrestling with the possibility of extending compassion to their enemy. It was a critical juncture, one that could lead to either destruction or the foundations of healing. Father Luis understood that true forgiveness was not simply about letting go, it required courage to confront the pain inflicted by others and, at times, even oneself. He believed that embracing forgiveness could guide the community toward rebuilding trust and moving forward. Yet, in stark contrast, violence loomed as an ever-present threat, the desire for revenge igniting like wildfire among those who had suffered so deeply. As he looked around at the faces filled with rage and sorrow, he saw both potential paths etched into their expressions. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, he urged, his voice steady amidst the chaos. It means choosing to seek peace rather than perpetuating a cycle of hatred. Just then, murmurs filled the air again as some townsfolk wrestled with his words, contemplating the cost of vengeance against the value of striving for understanding. Deep down, they knew that a choice lay before them, one that would define their lives moving forward. The child's innocent cry echoed once more, urging them to consider what kind of future they wanted for Durango, one marred by violence or a chance for healing through forgiveness and unity. The tension in the church erupted as a man from the back shouted, "Enough of this. He deserves no mercy." The words ricocheted off the walls, igniting a firestorm of anger among the congregation. Fists clenched and voices rose as others joined in, demanding justice for the pain Jake Mendez had inflicted on their families. The atmosphere shifted from a plea for understanding to a volatile mix of outrage and vengeance. Father Luis stood firm at the altar, his heart pounding as he faced the brewing storm. "This isn't the way," he implored, his voice trembling but resolute. "If we let anger take over, we become just like him." But as he spoke, several men surged forward, their faces twisted with rage. The friar's pleas fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the roar of voices clamoring for retribution against the rustler who had haunted them for so long. Just as it seemed chaos would reign, a small child stepped into the aisle, tears streaming down her face. "Please, don't hurt him," she cried, her innocent plea cutting through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent, and for a fleeting moment, all eyes turned to her. As her sobs echoed in the stillness, it became clear that this was not just a battle between individuals, it was a crossroads for the entire community. Would they choose to perpetuate violence, or could they find a way to forgive, guided by the heart of a child? The fate of Durango hung in the balance. In the profound silence that followed the child's plea, the grizzled faces of the townsfolk began to soften, their expressions shifting from rage to contemplation. Father Luis seized this moment, stepping forward with renewed determination. "Look at her," he urged gently, gesturing toward the girl. "She sees humanity in all, even in those who have failed. We must not let our bitterness cloud our judgment." One by one, the murmurs of dissent quieted, replaced by a growing sense of unease among the crowd as they wrestled with their emotions. Those who longed for vengeance felt the weight of doubt settle heavily on their hearts. Jake, still lying on the ground and struggling for breath, remained a symbol of everything they despised yet could not ignore. He was also a fellow human being, wounded and vulnerable. "This is a chance for us to break free from the chains of hatred," Father Luis continued, his voice imbued with passion. "Let us show that we are better than this cycle of violence. Let us choose to embrace forgiveness, for ourselves as much as for him." A collective breath seemed to fill the church as hesitant nods spread throughout the congregation. The child's tears transformed into glimmers of hope as she stepped closer to her father, holding his hand tightly. In that moment, those gathered realized that perhaps they could find a way forward together, not through bloodshed but through healing and understanding, turning a potential tragedy into an opportunity for reconciliation within their community. In the aftermath of the intense confrontation, the atmosphere in the church transformed from one of anger to a profound sense of reflection. The townsfolk began to embrace the possibility of healing, united by a shared understanding that their community's future rested on their collective choices. Father Luis, though weary, felt a renewed sense of hope as he surveyed the faces around him, once filled with rage, now softened by contemplation. As they stood together in silence, an unspoken bond formed between them all, connecting their hearts in their shared pain and desire for a better future. The rustler lay on the floor, no longer merely an enemy but a fellow human being deserving of dignity and compassion in his most vulnerable moment. It became clear that moments of darkness could be transformed into opportunities for growth and unity if they chose to navigate the path of forgiveness together. "Let this be a new beginning for Durango," Father Luis proclaimed gently, his voice steady and uplifting. "We can rebuild our community brick by brick through kindness, compassion, and understanding." As they exited the church that day, the sun shone brightly overhead, casting warm rays upon the once divided town. Hand in hand, they took those first steps toward reconciliation, committing themselves not only to forgive Jake but to heal their own wounds as well. In that moment of shared purpose, it became clear, Durango could rise from the ashes of its past and embrace a brighter, more hopeful future, one where love triumphed over hatred.